morning, everyone. This is Julie McDonald with Microcom Technologies, and I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar with PoE Texas. Today's host is Tyler Andrews. He is their CEO and will be presenting today. If anyone has any questions, please submit them in the question box, and Tyler will answer them at the end of today's presentation. Tyler, I am finished for now. Thank you so much for being with us today. Please go ahead and take it on over.
Thank you, Julie, for that introduction, and thank you for giving us another opportunity to discuss Power over Ethernet with your audience. If you haven't seen our previous webinars, I recommend going back to watch them about the fundamentals of Power over Ethernet and about what new is happening in the $490 billion industry for automation and lighting. However, you don't have to have seen those to get the most out of today's presentation. In fact, if you know nothing about PoE, then you should find this a very valuable conversation. Today's webinar covers our specifiers, tongue-tied today, our specifiers guide to Power over Ethernet. You can download this presentation, you can download this tool from our website for future reference. If you are in the business of picking and or selling Power over Ethernet for your customers, then this presentation and our white paper will walk you through what you need to know to be able to pick the right Power over Ethernet for your application and get the best results for your customers, all designed to help get the most out of all designed to help your bottom line. Now, I'm assuming you know what Power over Ethernet is in general terms. It's combining power and data onto one Ethernet cable to operate devices, which leads to the first step in specifying Power over Ethernet you will do with PoE. First, you need to know what kind of project you're trying to tackle. That may seem kind of simple, like you wouldn't know what you're selling to your customers. Pardon me, got a cough here. Excuse me. Let's start that list over again so you can see that. It may seem kind of silly to think that you wouldn't know what you're selling to your customers, but knowing which type of project you're doing, whether it's lighting or Wi-Fi or phones, especially if you're doing a project with multiple types, will help you get the right balance of PoE and networking technology. As we get further along, I think you'll see how this applies. For now, the key here is to gather the specifications on the products you're using. These are usually in the form of a data sheet. And I'll share with you our first pro tip: how to get your product specifications. Rather than keeping paper copies of all your products floating around, you can simply Google the product name and data sheet, the word data sheet, to bring up a digital copy of the data sheet you're after. It's by far the easiest way to get that done. Once you know what product mix you're using, then you can start picking the right PoE standard to work with. And there are a bunch to choose from. I know you might have heard PoE is PoE, but there are different PoE standards for different applications and products. There's even PoE for non-PoE devices like PoE to USB-C or PoE to DC devices. A key question to answer first, though, is what type of data do you need? The three most common are 10-100 or half duplex, which really means 100 megabits per second or 100 megabits per second. There's also gigabit data and wireless data. I know there's a lot of hype around the newest and fastest data, and looking at my graphic here, you're saying, where's the 10 gig and 5G? The reality is that there are very few services and customers who need all of that data. Let me share a few rules of thumb. Most IP phones only use less than 10 megabits per second. Most IP cameras, they're still around 10 megabits per second. Now, I bet the internet you have at home for streaming your favorite Marvel movie on Disney Plus is only about 100 megabits per second. And it's the average for a small office, the incoming data for small office. Now, when you start getting up into higher end production grade cameras, you use a little bit more than 100 megabits per second, so they'll need a gigabit device, but they don't use all that gigabit data. Wi-Fi access points that are trying to feed data to multiple devices probably do need that additional bandwidth, so they usually go gigabit. So I recommend double checking your data sheet for the actual data rate, because you could save a fair amount of money by not wildly over-specifying the data. And knowing the data rate will help you pick the PoE switch or injector you need. Speaking of PoE, now let's talk about the different types of PoE you might see on your specifications and what they really mean. The difference in the standards comes from the power requirements and the types of devices PoE can operate. When most people start thinking about PoE, they think of what by standards is defined as IEEE 802.3 AF. What's important to know about it is that it can power 12-watt devices like IP phones and cameras. It's by far the most common standard you'll see today. Next comes PoE Plus, or IEEE 802.3 AT. It adds more power, up to about 25 watts. And because of that, it can handle more powerful devices like multi-radio Wi-Fi access points or USB-C devices like tablets or iPads. Then we get to high-powered PoE, which has a lot of names depending on what it does. 4-pair PoE, the term 4-pair PoE covers any PoE that uses all 8 wires of the Ethernet cable for power. Sometimes you'll see PoE++ or UPoE, which refers to 60-watt PoE. To be really specific, 60-watt PoE is most often called IEEE 802.3 BT Type 3. Yeah, it's a mouthful, I know, which refers back to the standards for that specific power level. When you see 90-watt PoE, it's usually referred to as IEEE 802.3 BT Type 4. Now, all of these high-powered PoE options open the door to things like lighting, automation, displays, and laptop charging. Think of it as the building infrastructure standard. Finally, we come to the passive PoE standards, including the one you're likely most familiar with, 24-volt passive PoE. Network infrastructure companies like Ubiquiti and Microcom use these always-on PoE standards for network devices that stay connected to the power and data at all times. So, how do you know what standard you're using or what mix of standards? That's where those data sheets come in. Every device's data sheet will tell you the standard it uses. Now, a quick note here, you've likely seen 12-volt PoE on a data sheet. What that actually means is that your device either uses 12-volt DC power or PoE, which in this case uses 48-volt DC power. So if you see that on your data sheet, ask your PoE provider for 48 to 56-volt PoE. Now let's answer the question of, do you pick a PoE switch or injector? A PoE switch, make sure that guy comes up. A PoE switch will have one or maybe a couple data uplink ports with multiple ports of power and data coming out. If you're installing a new network that doesn't have any special needs, you'll most likely use a PoE switch. A midspan or injector just adds PoE to a data line without touching or affecting the data. These devices are one-to-one, meaning you need a data line in for each PoE line out. These make sense if you already have a switch, you either want to upgrade to add PoE or you want to add more PoE to an existing PoE switch. Now, I know you've been there before. You have a network that's all configured and running flawlessly, but then some guy needs something that requires more power than your current PoE switch can handle. You don't want to tear up your network just to add a little more PoE, so don't. Just add an injector. Or maybe you need a specific switch or router for your application. Rather than compromise on your networking needs or pay for something more than you really need, just get the networking device you want and add PoE to it. The Ubiquiti USW Flex Mini router is the perfect example, where that little 4-port router plus a 4-port injector costs much less than adding a full PoE switch to the network. Let me get that set up. I'll touch briefly on DC devices and USB devices to highlight that you don't have to use PoE only with PoE devices. You can convert everything to PoE from a Raspberry Pi to an iPad, even all the way down to a full laptop or PC using Power over Ethernet. We offer a full line of converters that can convert PoE into almost any format you need for your device. Drop us a line to learn more about how you can add PoE to almost any project and what you can do with it, including our newest device that does PoE to USB-C for laptops. Let's move on to the power budget. If you haven't noticed yet, I talk a lot about power. I mean a lot. Maybe because it's even in the name, Power over Ethernet. And I've thrown around the term watts in this presentation, which is really a measurement of power, and that really tells you how much work something can do. Now, you remember the table I was just talking to earlier about how much power the Power over Ethernet standards can offer? That is the power available on just one port of your switch or injector. Now we need to talk about your total power budget for your switch or injector, which is not the same thing as the per port power budget. Let's take a simple example of a 4-port switch. Let's say I have a 4-port PoE Plus switch like this one. That means any one of these 4 ports can output 25 watts. I can power an iPad Pro with that. Now, let's assume I put 4 iPad Pros, each drawing 20 watts of power on each port. 4 times 20 is 80. That means I need a total power budget of 80 watts. If my switch only has 65 watt total power budget, then some of these ports will power off to protect the switch, giving you unstable results. As you pick your PoE switch or injector, you need to look at the total power budget and compare it to the number of devices and the power they'll draw. We have a table you can fill out to record the power you expect to draw by device and calculate your total power budget. Now, pro tip, if your total power budget is close to the total power budget of your switch, you will likely need to account for cable losses in your power. What do I mean by that? As power, even PoE power, travels down a cable, it loses a little bit of power to heat for every foot it travels. So if I have an IP camera that needs 7 watts of power on a cable run of 10 feet, I may need 9 watts of power on a cable to run 330 feet. For math fans out there, the correct calculation is a quadratic equation taking into account power used at the end device, cable properties, and distance. But for everyone else who doesn't have the inclination or time to look up engineering values and do algebraic equation balancing, we have a simple calculator where you can plug in a few values and get the right answer right away, and some recommendations from us on what they mean. You can find our calculator online or on the App Store, so you can put it on your phone. With that, now you're ready to pick the right PoE converters and power sourcing equipment or PSE for your project, which is fantastic. I do often get asked the question about what cable specifications you should use or recommend to your customers. I'll share a few rules of thumb to help you navigate that question. Cables really come down to how much data do you need to send and how far it needs to go, how much power you need to send, and where you're putting your cables. Oh, and don't forget how much you're willing to spend for those cables, because as we go up the line, they get more and more expensive. For real world use, there are generally these category cables: Cat 5e, Cat 6, Cat 6a, and for really high end and pretty rare uses, there's Cat 7. I won't cover Cat 7 because that's really a specialized product. you won't likely see in the field. Cat5e can handle gigabit data and PoE Plus up to 330 feet. There are special Cat5e cables with extra thick conductors for high-powered PoE applications, which would work well for lighting and automation and are just a little bit cheaper than Cat6. Cat6 is probably the one you've heard of the most. Cat6 can handle 10 gigabit of data for short distances and gigabit up to 330 feet, as well as high-powered 60-watt or more powerful PoE. Most customers will request Cat6 as their standard. To get 10 gigabit or over any distance, you really need Cat6a. And the big differences in the connectors, in the shielding, and the twisted pairs. It is the most expensive of those three, both to install, to buy, certify, install, and certify. So you probably don't need it unless you have a 10 gigabit application. Next, you need to decide plenum versus non-plenum versus outdoor cable. I'm sure you know when you're going outdoors. And I really recommend not trying to use indoor cable outside. UV and wet weather require a special type of cable covering, and you might be a little surprised just how fast indoor cable will wear out if run outside. And that means you get to go out and replace the cable. So let's talk about plenums and what plenums are all about. Plenums are spaces in buildings that move air around and can create special fire hazards. So everything in them is designed to be hard to burn and won't produce as much smoke. You might be surprised to find out where plenums actually are. For example, many, but not all, drop ceiling spaces are also plenums. So if you're installing cabling in a drop ceiling, it's a safe bet it's a plenum. If you're going behind sheetrock or an attic or crawl space, you're likely not in a plenum, and riser cabling can be used. You can always check with the owner or architect to confirm whether that space is classified as a plenum or not. Finally, what about shielded versus unshielded? Shielding protects the data signal from electrical noise. If the cable will be around high voltage electrical, HVAC equipment, or machinery, it's a safe bet to go shielded. Otherwise, it's an optional thing for Cat5e. I've seen a couple of Cat6 that don't offer shielding, but most Cat6 I know is shielded regardless, so that makes the decision easier. So with all of that, I've thrown a ton at you. That about covers what you need to know about specifying PoE, except for possibly one thing, where you can go for help. At PoE Texas, we have live PoE experts right here in Austin, Texas, to answer any questions you may have and help you pick the right solution for your project. You can reach us at success@poetexas.com or talk to a real person at 512-479-0317. We look forward to talking with you. And with that, I'll remember that you can download this guide that we went through today from our website and wish you the best of luck with your PoE project and a great holiday season. Julie, I'm turning it back over to you. Julie, did I lose you?
Yes, hi, Tyler. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. And let's see, let's get started with some questions. First question here, when is it worth it to upgrade from Cat6 to Cat6a?
Great question. It's worth it when you need to transport 10 gigabits of data more than 10 feet. So if you're doing like a serious backbone for a major network, Cat6a does make a difference. But if you're just doing gigabit, Cat6 is a good recommendation. Now, having said that, if your customer just says, I want Cat6a, customer's always right.
Thank you very much. Next question for you. If a customer isn't sure they're wanting PoE Texas products and they're looking around at, say, your competitors, what can we tell them, or what could they perhaps find on your website regarding competitors' products versus your products?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So if you're looking for some of the competitive advantages for our products, the most interesting thing that I would share with you is that, remember we had that long conversation of total power budget. One of the things that really separates us from a lot of our competitors out there is of the total power budget. Because we focus on PoE, we go for full power as often as we can. So that is an important statement to look at, is make sure your customer, because very often we get compared. Somebody says, well, Tyler, why is your product, 10, 15, depending on the size, $30, $50 more than this product? Well, when you take a look at the actual total power budget of a switch or an injector from a competitor, you find out that if you're using all the ports, you can't use all of them for PoE. You may be limited to 6 out of 12 ports that you can actually run your project on, because you'll run out of power at 6 devices. So the difference in power budget is that for our switches and injectors, that's an important difference. We always aim to get the most power possible. Like we have a 24-port switch that does 90 watts per port on all 24 ports. And frankly, that's extremely rare. We think we don't know of anybody else who can have 2,160 watts of power on a 24-port switch. Then on the other side, when you're looking at connectors like the PoE to USB-C converters and adapters, an important thing to recognize is how long we've been doing it. So we do have competitors who've tried to do some USB-C things. They do maybe 1 or 2 things. Our breadth of experience for converting PoE to DC, other types of products, means we're very familiar with the intricacies, the ins and the outs, and the little problems that you would face converting PoE to other types of things like USB-C and DC. So those would be a couple of the things. Now, we're not in the habit of talking bad about our competitors because we want to be compatible. We want to be a good player and integrate with other manufacturers. So we try and just make sure we're clear on where our advantages are, but don't as often get into where that doesn't quite work the same way for our competitors.
Excellent, thank you, Tyler. And no, of course, we don't expect you to down talk competitors. I understand. We're just looking for, competitor information. Mm-hmm. Next question here for you. I understand there is a PoE calculator. How accurate is it? Can you tell us about that?
Yes, the PoE calculator is accurate to 1/10 of a watt. And that PoE calculator is really valuable because like we talked about in the training, you may find that especially if you're doing more powerful PoE, the longer the run, you may need a different voltage, incoming voltage. I was just helping a customer today to do a project where if he just did a very simple 48 volts, he's drawing enough power and he's running it long enough that it creates a problem for his end device over the cables he's able to use. So we could use a calculator to do some number crunching and show him, hey, you've actually, in fact, the cable you're picking, the power you're drawing, the run length you're going means you really need a 56 volt power supply. And because we can swap out products from 48 to 56 volts, that was a very simple fix. He didn't have to buy a whole bunch of new equipment. He just swapped out his power supply, and it got him working, and he had a short turnaround time. So we were very proud to be able to help him turn that around in 2 days, solve his problem, get him new products, and get him back to work for his customers.
Excellent, Tyler. Thank you so much for that. Next question here for you. Does PoE Texas have any other estimating or computing tools that could help customers find the right equipment? I guess similar to what you just described.
Sure. So if you visit our calculator page online, we actually have 3 calculators. There's a PoE calculator. There is a DC power, and we have two versions of a DC power calculator. So if you're trying to figure out how far I can run different types of DC and see what the voltage drop, we've got those calculators. Now, what we talked about in our last webinars, we also have a quick estimating tool for how to estimate what a PoE lighting and automation installation would cost a customer. So if you have a customer who's considering, hey, I want to upgrade to PoE lighting, I want to add these features to my building, we have a quick calculator that lets you put in square footage, get a few bits of information about what services you want, and that can give them a ballpark estimate, just a real quick initial estimate for that, what those would cost in their building, and then we could follow up with an actual estimate. So that's another thing that we offer our customers, is the ability to estimate what do quick turnaround on quotes for specific equipment to do large projects.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tyler. Next question here for you. We got somebody asking about the supply chain issues that everybody's been facing. It seems to be getting better slowly. How's it working for PoE Texas?
Well, that's a great question. We've had to jump around through a lot of hoops, and frankly, what it really is boiled down to for us as a company is investing in the right inventory as early as possible. So we've doubled down. We have manufacturers and products that we can really trust, so we've doubled down and made sure we secured the right inventory for our customers. We have not seen any long-term, and by long-term I mean more than a few week delays on very specific products. We've had to shift what ports we're going through. So all of those things have meant that we're surviving it well. I do recommend, just as a blanket statement, reach out to your manufacturer, us and any other manufacturers you work with as early as possible, because usually the issue isn't specifically you just can't get it. The issue is you can't get it as fast as you would like. So that's why us investing more, it means that our forecasts are a lot longer. We're buying more inventory so that we can keep that on stock and support customers without delays from shipping and other methods. So it is affecting us. I do think, if I'm just being honest, we fought very hard to keep our pricing the same over the past few months, but I think what you're going to see is prices go up across the board for electronics and technical equipment. So I would say expect that to happen. We're working very hard to keep our prices the same, and so far we've been able to do that.
Excellent. Thank you, Tyler. Yes, we've seen a little differences and a little bit of issues here and there, but it seems to be loosening up for everybody, and we're glad to hear that. Next question here for you. If one goes to your website, you had mentioned data sheets, and if someone is looking for some technical information, they will find it. Is that correct? Can you kind of point us in that direction?
Yes, so I recommend you go to shop.poetexas.com. You find the product you're looking for, and then we actually just have a print function that as you scroll down to the product you're looking at, there's a print function, you hit print and it prints out a data sheet for you. So that's a great question. We wanted to make it simpler for our customers to be able to reference and get to quickly. So as you buy products, you can see it on our website. You can also, if you'd like, you can also go to the online manuals through our technical center. So if you go to the technical center, you can search for the product. You'll see the full manual with all the technical specifications there. And then we keep all that information up to date so that in case some information changes, you're not trying to dig through paper, and we're not trying to mail out a whole bunch of new manuals every week. If one specification changes or if we do an update for a minor thing.
Excellent, thank you. And yes, that's what our websites are there for, even for the smallest changes. Yeah, no more mailing out mail.
Yeah, usually it's a typo, because we get guys who call us up and they're like, what does 60° D mean? And we're like, oh shoot, somebody misspelled that one. So we'll get it corrected.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tyler. Next question for you. If someone is looking for technical support, can we find that on your website, or is there a best email address or phone number to call if, in fact, maybe they've tried Microcom and maybe we have to turn around and look for some technical support from you?
Great question. The PoE Texas, we actually have a very good service department. We have a service level agreement where if you don't hear back, if you reached out to us through our success, just the word success at poetexas.com, or the number I shared, 512-479-0317, if you don't hear back from a live person in Austin within an hour, I hear about it. So we do provide excellent support. And I like to explain to people what kind of support you should expect from PoE Texas. When you call to speak to that expert, that person is fully empowered to solve your problem. What that means is you're not going to get bounced around where you call and somebody says, okay, I'm going to sit here, keep you on the phone for 10 minutes asking you all your personal information. Then you tell me the problem, and then I go, oh, I can't solve that problem. You need to talk to somebody else. And they bounce you to another department that makes you run through the whole same thing. When you reach your PoE Texas expert, that person is enabled to solve any order problems, accounting problems, answer technical issues, get new orders processed for you, and take care of all the problems you need. If they don't do it themselves, which you can't expect one person to solve every problem, they are still your quarterback, the person that's going to make sure your solution gets solved, and they'll be your point of contact until that problem is solved. So we're very proud of that. So you get a 1 hour response time during business hours, and then we contact you first thing the next morning if you contact us after business hours. And that's something we're very proud of, and that goes for all of our products.
Excellent, Tyler. Thank you so much, because many times customer service and technical support are various people, or even multiple amount of people, that when one person can kind of handle most, if not all, of one's questions, that's really very, very helpful for Microcom too, if we need to turn around and ask you questions on behalf of any of our customers.
Yes, you can expect we service Microcom, and then if with that 1 hour service level support, and then if we need to talk directly to customers of Microcom, we're happy to do that. We love talking to our customers, and we do that because we're confident in our products, and we're confident that we can show customers how to get the most out of their systems, and and that means we can grow as a business and support more people. And so that's an important feature of how we do business.
Tyler, thank you so much for answering all of those questions for us today. And thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar. And if anyone winds up that they have any further questions, of course, please reach out to your sales rep or email us at sales@microcomtech.com. And if you wish to view any of the products mentioned or shown today, please visit us at www.microcom.us. And please remember, this webinar presentation has been recorded and will be uploaded to our Microcom YouTube channel so that you can view it again. Thank you so much, Tyler. We appreciate all of your information and especially your time. Love your Christmas sweater, and until next time, we will have another webinar again with you in the first quarter of next year. Have a great day, everybody. Bye, Tyler.
Thanks, Julie.